Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Andy's Witchcraft by me, Sacred Moon. I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. Today's episode, we are going to discuss the next Wheel of the Year holiday that is coming up, and that is Yule. Yule is actually my favorite Wheel of the Year holiday besides Samhain. They kind of like tie for first, I think. But I'm really super excited about this. I'm excited to talk to you about all the traditions surrounding Yule from a Christian perspective, a pagan perspective, and a Buddhist perspective, from my spiritual practices. But yeah, so I hope you find this video informational, and let's get started. So, for those of you who don't know, whether you're a beginner witch or you're a witch who doesn't follow the Wheel of the Year holidays, you may be asking what the heck Yule is, and I will answer that. Yule is a holiday celebrated anywhere from between December 20th till December 23rd in the Northern Hemisphere, and usually between June 20th and 21st in the Southern Hemisphere. It is also called the winter solstice, midwinter, Yuletide, Alban Arthen, Finn's Day, Festival of Sol, Great Day of the Cauldron, and Festival of Growth. This holiday marks the longest night of the year, and therefore it is the night where we celebrate the return of the sun. It is a time of reflection, connecting to those who we love, and spending time in nature. Specifically, it is known to be a time of rebirth, the time where you focus on your goals for the future and remove any spiritual blocks and emotional clutter that you may have. Yule is a holiday that began to be celebrated in various Northern European traditions, particularly in the pre-Christian Germanic people. Many of the traditional winter traditions can be traced back to the Norse people. They originally called this festival Yule, J-O-L. And decorating with greenery, hanging ornaments, caroling, and gift giving were extremely popular and traditional to do during this time. When the days grew colder with the coming winter and the nights grew longer, people would light candles and gather around fires to lure back the sun. They would bring food to enjoy feasting and festivities, and they would sing and dance and decorate their homes to celebrate the winter season. Some scholars believe that Yule is closely related to Saturnalia, which is a week-long holiday that ancient Romans celebrated around the solstice. At this time, Romans honored Saturn, the god of agricultural bounty, with feasts of gift-giving. So, that is a basic introduction to Yule. Now I kind of want to talk about some mythologies and traditions surrounding Yule. How these traditions came to be, what are like the origin stories. As I stated before, Norse people were really like, at least the earliest that we could find, traditions of celebrating a form of Yule. And so this mythology begins with Odin. Many Yule traditions revolve around Odin's mythology. Odin, disguised in a long blue-hooded cloak, would travel to Earth on his 8-legged horse Sleipnir. And he would observe the homesteaders gathered around the campfires and see how content the people were. Odin was portrayed as an old man with a long white beard. And for those in need of food, he left his gifts of bread and then disappeared before anyone could really notice. The children of these lands would anticipate the arrival of gift-bearing Odin and would fill their boots with straw, carrots of sugar, and place them near the fireplace so that Sleipnir could come down to eat during his midnight rides. This is very similar to the tradition of leaving cookies and milk for Santa and his reindeer. Odin would then reward these children by replacing the food with gifts and candy inside the boots. And according to legend, Odin, the father of all the gods, portrayed one of the 12 characters each month of the year. In December, he became Yule, which spelled Jul. The season of his arrival would be known as Yuletide. So that is kind of like the origin story. From Odin's perspective, Odin is kind of like the Norse Santa Claus, which I found really cool, and that's why I was like, hey, let's share this. The next mythology, the next few are kind of like very brief. I could not find really extensive stories, although I'm sure if you have the time to pull up books on certain deity mythologies, you can find some. But the next one is Freyr. And during this time, boars were offered to Freyr during Yuletide. And it's because Freyr had a golden boar named Gullinbursti. After the sacrifice, the meat would be shared in a feast, and they would ensure that none of it would be wasted. And we'll talk more about the Yule boar in a bit, but I suspect that this is kind of where that originated. But yeah, so Yule was a time where many deities would receive sacrifices and gifts, especially in Norse traditions. The next two deities that their mythologies are very prominent during Yule are the Holly King and the Oak King. So Yule is the time of the year when the Holly King, who represents the dark half of the year, gives way to the sun god, also known as the Oak King. During the warm days of summer, when in full leaf, the Oak King is at the height of his strength. On the approach of winter, with the loss of the Oak King's leaves, the Holly King regains power, and his power peaks at the winter solstice. The idea of these two battling gods represents the ever-changing seasons and the cycle of the sun. The next deity we are going to discuss is Krampus. Now, if you're a horror movie fanatic, you probably know of the movie Krampus. I don't know too much about him, like his real mythology, but I suspect that the movie is a little bit of an exaggeration of his story. But regardless, we're going to talk about him right now. So, Krampus originated as a German Christmas tradition during the 12th century. Beginning in early December, the children of Germany would begin to hear whispers of a dark-haired creature bearing horns and fangs, carrying a bundle of birch sticks used to swat naughty children. According to mythology, Krampus would enter the towns, lashing his chains and bells to capture the bad children in a basket and bring them down to the underworld. Krampus night, which is called Krampusnacht, I think that's how you pronounce it, would occur the evening before December 6th. And this is when the nice German children were rewarded by St. Nicholas with presents in their boots. So that's Krampus' story. Many of you probably know it. I think his story is pretty cool. I don't worship him or work with him, but I just admire, which is weird to say, but there's some like weird attraction that I have to his story. Maybe again because I'm a horror movie fanatic and my mind still thinks of the horror movie franchise. But regardless, if you work with Krampus, be sure to leave him a little something tonight. The next mythology we are going to talk about is the Yule goat, also called the Yule Boken. Origins of this story are lost. We don't really know how it started, but we do know that regardless, it continued on for generations. The Yule Boken is nowadays made of straw, and it indicates that this was once an offering from the last harvest, like how British corn dollies are given. So the corn left over, or the corn straw left over from the harvest, that would be used to make the goat. However, there are other traditions where they have a man dressing up as a goat at Yule, and it indicates that the Yule goat may have been involved in a fertility ritual, or even connected to the two goats who pulled Thor's chariot in Norse mythology. Again, we see that Norse mythology origin story. A lot of these have roots there. Again, nothing is known for certain of who really started the Yule goat tradition, but the point is there are many traditions and many mythologies that follow this, and it has just continued on for generations. The next mythology we're going to discuss is the Yule boar. I alluded to this earlier, and now we're kind of going to finish it off. The Yule boar is a huge thing in many traditions, and I mean many, many traditions, way more than what I'm listing here. So if you want to know more about the Yule boar, worldwide cultural traditions, definitely look it up because it's interesting stuff. Similar to the Yule goat, the last ear of corn reaped in the preceding harvest would be used to make a cornmeal loaf baked into the shape of a boar. In some areas, the Yule boar was kept out only during Yuletide, but in others, it was kept into the spring when it was mixed with the new crop of corn and then consumed. The older traditions didn't have a symbolic boar of corn, but they included literal boar animal sacrifices, or, unfortunately, humans' sacrifices, symbolically representing the boar sacrificed. In Thesmophoria, it was customary to throw pigs, cakes of dough, and pine branches into caverns sacred to Demeter and Persephone. During the next annual festival, women who had been ritually purified for 3 days descended into these caverns to retrieve the decayed remains of the pigs, the cakes, and the pine branches, and then they would bring them to an altar where they would worship the deities. The decayed matter was then sown with the grain to ensure a good crop. The ancient ritual was explained by a legend that held that when Pluto carried off Demeter's daughter Persephone, a swineherd named Eubulus happened to be herding swine on the spot, and his herd vanished along with Persephone. So this is really cool. Now we're bringing in the Greek traditions, which I think is super cool. Again, I love hearing about these different customs because I don't believe in a single right way to worship or to practice or to celebrate, and to see everybody finding their own way to honor their gods in that specific way is pretty cool. Finally, we have the Yule cat. The Yule cat was first written in the 19th century, so relatively newer compared to the other stories that I just told. The Yule cat is known to watch and see what children got new clothes during the Yuletide season. For it was said that a child that got new clothes had behaved and done their chores, but a child that didn't get new clothes had been naughty. Therefore, they would become offerings to the Yule cat, and they would never be seen again. In part, the story of the Yule cat may have been written to help generate a call for those of wealth to be generous and give clothes to the needy. And unfortunately, if you believe in this tradition, many kids who could not afford to get new clothes for the holidays would not be lucky, and they would kind of belong to the Yule cat. So that's an interesting story. This is actually a new one for me. I never heard of this one. And as someone who loves cats, this makes me think a little differently about them. I'm like, oh, is that the Yule cat watching me right there? I don't know. But regardless, I think it was pretty cool. And I hope you enjoyed hearing those many origin stories for Yule. So now that we got the mythologies out of the way, I'm now going to discuss the Christian counterpart to Yule. Don't worry, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we all know what Christmas is. We all know what it celebrates. And most of us know that Jesus wasn't actually born on December 25th. Anthropological evidence and biblical evidence, like people who analyze the Bible, I don't know what they're called, but the evidence shows that he was actually born in the spring, estimated to be sometime in March. Many people believe that the church chose Christmas to be in December to get people to move away from celebrating Yule and towards celebrating a Christian tradition. I do believe that. I do believe that the way things are dated has reasoning, and that certain events didn't actually happen during those times of the year. But one of the things that's interesting the most to me is that, so we all know, like I said, Yule celebrates the sun's return, okay? And so the story goes that the church decided to make Jesus' celebration of his birth in December because when Yule celebrates the return of the sun, S-U-N, it would make sense to celebrate the birth of God's son, S-O-N, at this time. So it's kind of like the return of the Son of God. That's an interesting explanation. I like to think that that's part of the reason, that like poetic reasoning, but we all know the church historically does not necessarily do things for poetic reasons, mostly because of political reasons, control reasons, and so that's just an unfortunate truth. One figure in Christianity that I do want to discuss is Saint Nicholas, because we all know how some believe that he's how Santa Claus came to be, others believe that Odin is how Santa Claus came to be, and others believe that it was both. Saint Nicholas, because historically society has been so Christian dominated, it was mostly Saint Nicholas that like brought it into popularity, the concept of Santa Claus, because not many people after the church came into control, and Norse mythology slowly got erased, and then Christian traditions started gaining popularity. Nobody really knew that Odin was like the Norse Santa Claus, and so many people found out about Saint Nicholas, and some people believe that he's how Santa Claus came to be. Regardless of how he came to be, he's also kind of like the Christian Santa Claus. So he is one of the most popular minor saints commemorated. He is the patron saint of children and sailors, and he is associated with Christmas, of course. In many countries, children receive gifts on December 6th, which is the feast of Saint Nicholas. And Saint Nicholas's existence is not really found in any historical document, actually. Nothing is known for sure about his life, except that he was probably emphasized, the Bishop of Myra in the 4th century. So this is an interesting thing to me, because Saint Nicholas's story has been like passed on for so long, and to find out that there's no concrete historical document and that his story was just passed on by word of mouth, that was pretty interesting for me to find out. According to tradition, he was born in the city of Patara, which is an ancient city in Lycia, and he traveled to Palestine and Egypt later on in life. He became the Bishop of Myra soon after returning to Lycia, and in 1087, Italian sailors or merchants stole his alleged remains from Myra and took them to Bari, Italy, and this removal greatly increased the saint's popularity in Europe. And Bari became one of the most crowded of all pilgrimage centers. Nicholas's reputation for generosity and kindness gave rise to legends of miracles he performed for the poor and unhappy. He was reputed to give marriage dowries, of gold to 3 poor girls, and legend has it that he even brought 3 children back to life. After the Reformation, which is the religious revolution that took place in the Western Church in the 16th century, devotion to Nicholas disappeared in all the Protestant countries of Europe except Holland. Holland kept his legend going, and he was known as Sinterklaas, which is a Dutch variant of the name Saint Nicholas. And then Sinterklaas, because it sounds like Santa Claus, that's how the English-speaking majority brought that name up. They thought instead of Sinterklaas, they could not pronounce that properly, so they called it Santa Claus for simplicity's sake. And so his legend of a kindly old man was united with old Norse folk tales, again, most likely Odin. So again, it's really interesting to see how many figures can have similar backgrounds. Now, I do want kind of a word of caution kind of thing, because when I was reading this, it was very suspicious to me that he's not found in any historical document. His story passed on by word of mouth. Things get lost in translation. Not all the generations talk about him, etc., etc. But of course, because of the church's history of trying to erase other mythologies, other gods out of existence, I am suspicious that it's possible that Saint Nicholas, his story could have been brought up just to erase the existence of Odin. Regardless, I do believe in a Saint Nicholas. I do believe that, there was a guy, maybe his name wasn't Nicholas, but I do believe somewhere out there was a rich bishop who gave to the poor and needy during Christmas. I do believe in that because I believe there is good in the world. However, whether it is this exact Saint Nicholas that the church portrays, that's up to debate because, again, no historical documents really exist. Now, let's talk about some Bible verses that mention the winter season. This is for all you Christian witches. If you want to make some Yule spells and you want some Bible verses to accompany that, stick around. This could be for you. Now, obviously, I could, just give Bible verses on the birth of Jesus and all that. And I, of course, that is an important thing. Because again, this is the time when Jesus' birth is celebrated. Even though, he wasn't necessarily born in December. Bible verses that discuss the birth of Jesus are Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 until chapter 2, verse 23. That's a long one. And Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 20. So, of course, we could talk about these verses all day long. But I'm not going to because beyond that, there are also Bible verses discussing the importance of the winter season or the changing seasons. And so that's what I'm going to focus on today. Number 1, when winter season is mentioned in the Bible, it is a reminder of God's control over the natural world. The first Bible verse that discusses this is Genesis chapter 8, verse 22. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. Next we have Job chapter 37, verses 6 through 10. For to the snow, he says, fall on the earth, and to the downpour and the rain, be strong. He heals the hand of every man, that all men may know his work. Then the beast goes into its lair and remains in its den. Out of the south comes the storm, and out of the north the cold. From the breath of God ice is made, and the expanse of the waters is frozen. Next we have Isaiah chapter 55, verse 10. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven, and do not return there without watering the earth, and making it bear and sprout, and furnishing seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Now, if you're planning on doing abundance magic for Yule, like to bring abundance into the new year, that is a very good verse to use. So, highly recommend using that. The next verse is Psalm chapter 74, verse 17. You have set all the borders of the earth. You have made summer and winter. We also have Psalm chapter 147, verses 16 through 18. He spreads the snow like wool and scatters the frost like ashes. He hurls down his hail like pebbles. Who can withstand his icy blast? He sends his word and melts them. He stirs up his breezes and the waters flow. And finally, for this section, Zechariah chapter 14, verse 8. And in that day it shall be that living waters shall flow from Jerusalem, half of them toward the eastern sea and half of them toward the western sea. In both summer and winter it shall occur. Now this verse symbolizes the spiritual blessings that will be available to everyone regardless of the season. So if you want a Bible verse that talks about bringing in God's energy or the energy of the Holy Spirit for the spell, this is a good one to bring to kind of like conjure up that spirit. And then number 2, winter is also brought up in the Bible as a metaphor for challenging times. We have Proverbs chapter 20, verse 4, that says, "The lazy man will not plow because of winter. He will beg during harvest and have nothing." We also have Proverbs chapter 26, verse 1, "As snow in summer and rain in harvest, so honor is not fitting in a fool." Then we have Proverbs chapter 31, verse 21. "When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet." Now, in this case, snow is a time of difficulty and challenges, but in this context, she doesn't fear because she has faith that God will provide, even in the challenging times. Next, we have Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 11. "For behold, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone." And finally, we have Matthew, chapter 24, verse 20. "And pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath." So, those are all Bible verses from the birth of Jesus to metaphors about the wintertime season. Those are the biblical associations with Yule. And so I really encourage you to use some Bible verses in your spell work because it can make really, really powerful stuff. The Bible is a book of spells. It is a book of poetry, and it has many uses. So if you are a Christian witch or someone who likes to use the Bible for your spells, I highly encourage you to do so. Now I'm going to talk about some Yule associations, symbolisms, things you could put on your altar, and just any items that represent Yule. The first category is the element, and fire is kind of the main element associated with Yule. The overall theme of Yule is about rebirth and renewal, and it is a festival of the sun, and so fire is an important element, especially if you're going to use it to call upon the return of the sun. Colors associated with Yule are red, which is representative of the Holly King, green, which represents the Oak King, or the return of nature and the coming of spring, white, which represents the purity and hope of new light, silver, which represents the moon, and gold, which represents the sun. Foods and drinks associated with Yule. The first one is called wassail. It is a strong drink, usually a mixture of ale, honey, and spices, or mulled apple cider. When pagans went into the forest to cut the great oak for the Yule log, they would anoint the tree with wassail and decorate them with wassail-coated cakes. At home, the wassail would be poured into a large bowl during feast time, and the host would lift a drink and wish them ways hail, which means good health, to which they would reply, drink hail, drink and be well. The next food associated with Yule is the bûche de Noël. This is the Yule log cake. And so that's for obvious reasons. If you can't make your own Yule log, definitely buy a bûche de Noël because they're really yummy and they're just a great symbolism. And you could leave it as an offering on the altar for your deities. So bonus points. Next is plum pudding. Could not find the reasoning behind this, but I've heard a lot of people say that plum pudding is a popular dessert to make for Yule. And then we also have apple, caramel, cinnamon, ginger, oranges, peppermint, pomegranate, and cider. So these are all great foods for Yule. Things you can leave as an offering, things you can eat to bring in that Yuletide spirit. And yeah. Crystals associated with Yule are ruby, bloodstone, garnet, emerald, clear quartz, citrine, and obsidian. Of course, there are many, many more crystals you could use. Obviously, any crystals that are the colors of Yule, so that white, green, red. I don't know if they're silver crystals, but silver or gold. Any crystals that are those colors are great to use for Yule as well. Now, let's talk about some Yule symbols. The first one is the Yule log. The practice of burning a Yule log was common in ancient Scandinavian cultures. In these cultures, they would burn a huge log cut from an ash tree to honor their god Thor. In the Celtic tradition, a continual hearth fire was kept to prevent spirits from entering the home. And in order for the fire to keep burning, a large oak tree was cut down and brought into the home, where the tree was placed trunk first into the hearth, with the last remnants set aside to burn with next year's fire. It was believed that the longer the Yule log burned, the faster the sun would come to warm the earth. Next, we have candles. Candles are used to chase away evils and bring back the returning sun. Then we have wreaths. These symbolize the wheel of the year and the completion of another cycle. It is made of evergreens and adorned with cones and berries and hung as decoration throughout the home. Historically, wreaths were given as gifts to symbolize the infinity of goodwill, friendship, and joyfulness. The next symbol are bells. These are rung the morning of the winter solstice to drive away demons that surface during the dark time of the year. They were also rung to herald in the warmer, brighter days. The next symbol for Yule are elves. These first became associated with Yule because the ancients knew that the spirits that created the sun inhabited the land of elves. By including elves in Yule celebrations, they believed that they would assure that the elves would assist in the sun's return. And finally, gingerbread. Gingerbread is considered to be a specialty bread during this time. Historically, ginger was not available until the Crusaders brought it back in the 11th century. So, back then, there were strict laws regarding specialty breads, and gingerbread was only allowed to be produced during the holidays. Thus, it became associated with winter and Yule. Animals associated with Yule are the Yule goat or buck, the Yule boar, Yule cat, stags, wolf, hawk, squirrels, wren, robin, phoenix, trolls, myrmecolian, bear, deer, eagles, owls, squirrels, snow geese, and tigers. Now, I do want to advise, as someone who understands cultural appropriation and does everything in their power to avoid it, if you are working with spirit animals, please make sure that you are not practicing close practices. Make sure you don't work with spirit animals. I know there's a difference between animal spirits and spirit animals or something like that. I know, but do your research basically. Moral of the story, if you are planning on working with any bones of animals or spirits of animals, do your research. Talk to indigenous people who are willing to, educate on what's close practice, and do not practice close practices, okay? I am putting that advisory out there. Just don't do it. Thank you. The next section we have are plants and herbs. The first plants that I want to discuss are evergreens, because we talked about it a lot. And so evergreens are popular because they symbolize life, rebirth, and renewal. They were thought to have power over death because their green never fades, and they were used to defeat winter demons, hold back death and destruction, and bring the return of the sun. The next plant is the holly. This represents the masculine element. Because of its prickliness, it was thought to capture or ward off evil spirits before they could enter a home and cause harm. The holly leaves, symbolic of the holly king, represent hope, while the red berries represent potency. Now, because of the prickliness, I love to use holly in my wards. I love them. I don't always have access to holly, but when I do, it's just great for protection magic and making wards. It's just fantastic. The next plant is the mistletoe. This represents the female element. Mistletoe is used by Druid priests in special ceremonies during the winter solstice. They believed that its green leaves represented the fertility of the mother goddess, and its white berries, the seed of the forest god or oak king. Druids would harvest mistletoe from sacred oak trees with golden scythes, and maidens would gather underneath the trees to catch the falling branches. The branches had to be caught before they touched the ground, because if they didn't, all the sacred energy in the plant would pour back into the earth. The branches and sprigs were then divided and distributed to be hung over doorways as protection against thunder, lightning, and other evils. Mistletoe was also worn as an amulet for fertility. However, it also represents peacemaking because Norsemen used to lay down their arms if they met underneath a growth of mistletoe. The next plant to discuss is ivy. Ivy serves as a reminder that life continues, as the plant often lives on after its host plant has died. It represents loyalty, and hanging ivy symbolizes the strength of familial bonds. Next, we have birch. This is associated with rebirth because it's the first tree to grow back in a forest that has burned. Birch sticks are also a weapon of choice for Krampus, like we talked about him earlier. And then finally, a list of other plants or herbs that you could use during this time are oak, laurel, bayberry, thistle, frankincense, myrrh, pine, sage, and yellow cedar. For sage, don't use white sage. Again, no cultural appropriation here. Do not practice close practices. I will always repeat that reminder. So sorry if you get annoyed, but not really sorry. Deities and spiritual beings that are wonderful to work with during this time are Yahweh, Jesus, Mother Mary, Saint Joseph, Saint Nicholas, the Holly King, Krampus, Oak King, Mother Earth, Gaia, Freya, Diana, Isis, Demeter, Mabon, the Sun God, the Green Man, the Red Man, the Horned One, Odin, Lugh, Apollo, Ra, and Saturn. Finally, spell work that's perfect for this time are the basics, really your basic stuff. Candle magic is great, your basic manifestation spells, whatever they may be, and most importantly, quiet introspection and meditation. And I will say this time and time again, you do not have to just sit with your eyes closed in silence. When it says quiet introspection and meditation, quiet means without outer world influences. So like not when you're hanging out with a bunch of people. Quiet introspection just means independent. It means by yourself. And that could be journaling. It could be listening to music. It could be dancing by yourself in your room. It could be lighting a candle in your room. There are many ways to practice this that's not necessarily sitting cross-legged in a silent room. Next, I want to talk about some Buddhist traditions during Yule, because interesting enough, Buddhists also decorate trees, but their trees are decorated for a different occasion, and this is called Bodhi Day. Bodhi Day is a holiday that marks the Buddha's enlightenment and the attainment of nirvana. There are really 2 Bodhi days each year. There's the traditional Bodhi Day, which is celebrated on the 8th day of the 12th lunar month. So that means it changes year to year. The next one is January 18th, 2024. And then there's the quote-unquote secular Bodhi Day, which is celebrated on a fixed date in much of the Western world and in Japan. And it is December 8th because it's the 8th day of the 12th solar month. I personally, because I struggle with following the lunar month calendars, like I don't know what is the 12th lunar month or what's, the first lunar month. I struggle with keeping up with that. So I personally like to celebrate the secular Bodhi Day, and this will actually be my first time celebrating because it's my first time as a Buddhist. And so I'm really excited. I have so many ways to work with Buddha that day. I'm going to refresh my memory on the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. I'm going to reflect on how I was not mindful this year and what I can do to become more mindful. And I'm going to obviously light a candle for Buddha. I have just so many plans, and I'm really, really excited to celebrate Bodhi Day. Buddhists during this time adorn ficus or Bodhi trees with multicolored decorations and lights, and they display statues of Buddha. So this is one way to celebrate, but of course, as Buddhists, the best way to celebrate is to practice mindful meditation. So basically, Buddhists do celebrate Christmas, but it's not, instead of Jesus's birthday, it's kind of like the Buddha's birthday, because the Buddha didn't get the name Buddha until he was enlightened. So this was the day where Siddhartha Gautama decided he didn't decide, but he became the Buddha. And so it was kind of like his spiritual birth. Buddhists during this time focus on values of peace, love, and kindness. And the act of lighting and decorating trees is a way to express compassion, harmony, and respect for all living beings, especially plants and trees. And I absolutely love that this is celebrated around Christmas or Yule, because as a crystal pagan Buddhist, I celebrate Jesus' birthday. I celebrate the Buddha's enlightenment. And to me, Jesus was a bodhisattva. He was an enlightened man. And it's so cool how the physical birth of the Son of God is celebrated around the same time as the spiritual birth of the Buddha. Like, I just love seeing those patterns come to be. It's really cool to me. Plus, it's kind of nice to celebrate everything all at once instead of like throughout the year, like worrying about keeping up with all the holidays. Now, like everything is just kind of at the same time, which can be overwhelming for some, but for me, I like it. It helps me keep up. Now, finally, to finish off this episode, I would like to discuss ways that you can celebrate Yule. The first suggestion I have is to set up a Yule altar. Now, you could decorate it with anything I listed above in the associations. Hopefully, you took notes or kept in mind what you want to decorate with. But if you forget, things like bells or candles or elf statues, evergreens, pine cones, stars, snowflakes, sun symbols, stuff like that. The next thing you could do is a Yule log ceremony. This is a way to welcome back the sun. A log can be used first as your Yule altar, so you could actually use the log as your altar for Yule, decorate it with candles and evergreens, and then at like when Yule is over, you could burn it on the evening of the winter solstice. So it's like a 2-in-1 thing. Next, you can have your Yule tree, decorate and bless it. A cultural method of staying warm during the cold and dark months was to decorate the Yule tree, which I thought was really cool. Families would chop down a tree, bring it inside, cut logs from it whenever they needed more wood for the fire. And the idea of decorating this tree came from Germany in the 16th century when a town decorated a tree for its people. Soon after, families started decorating these trees with items that were readily available, like paper and straw crafts and dried fruits and candles. But please don't light candles near your Yule tree. That's dangerous. Please keep it at a safe distance and keep an eye on your candles. Speaking of candles, that's the next point. The next point is that you can light candles to celebrate Yule. Green and gold candles are really good options if you want to manifest prosperity, health, and growth. Red candles are good if you want to manifest courage and willpower. And white candles are good for protection, especially if you don't have black candles. White is an amazing alternative. The next suggestion I have is to recite prayers to welcome back to the sun. Now, these could be Bible verses, prayers that you made up, prayers you found online, prayers to your deities. There's so many ways that you could welcome back the sun that can work for this. The next suggestion I have is to perform cleansing rituals and, again, tree blessings. So your cleansing rituals can be used to bless your tree, or they could be used just to cleanse your space. There is smoke purification, which is burning seasonal plants like pine, cedar, rosemary, juniper, and frankincense. You can diffuse essential oils, especially if they're the scents of the herbs that I've listed above. And of course, you could do sound cleansing, bells, because bells are a great symbol with it. You could use music, you could sing to it, or you could use a singing bowl. Next, feasting. Feasting is my favorite celebration method. Like, I love to eat, I love food. Cooking large meals to share with family and friends is a great way to celebrate Yule. And specific courses for Yule can be made with the intention of manifesting the return of the sun. Finally, exchanging gifts. In ancient times, the exchange of gifts during Yule was a way to honor the gods, and now you can continue this tradition, not only to honor the gods, but honor people who are around you. Show you how thankful you are for your loved ones. it's really important to show how thankful you are and to say, I'm thankful for you. And Yule is an amazing time for that, um, especially when you have the day off of work or from school. You can have all your undivided attention on your family and the people who matter to you. So, that is it for this podcast episode. I hope you all found it informative. I hope you enjoyed my little comments here and there. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to me via social media. My social media pages will be linked below in the link tree. You could also join the Crystal Caverns. That's a good way to get in touch with me and join a community of like-minded people. The Crystal Caverns also just started. We're piloting our mentorship program. So if you want someone who has been extensively verified, we go through an extensive verification process. And so these mentors are for sure knowledgeable of witchcraft. They knowledgeable on close practices. They do not practice any close practices. We made sure of it. So if you want to find a mentor who's suitable for you, join Crystal Caverns. The link will be in my link tree below. You could also, if you have a video idea, a video you want me to make, click the link tree below, click video ideas link, and fill up the Google form. And I will be sure to make a video on your topic. Please give video suggestions. I would love to hear what you want me to talk about. And so that is it for this episode. Again, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for sticking around. Blessed be everyone. Have a wonderful day, week, month, and year.